This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 518 of the Yellow Wall Pods. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about a 4-1 win against Bilbao in the Champions League, a 2-0 win on the road away to Mainz, and we will preview Saturday's game against RB Leipzig. For all that and more joins me Lars Pollmann. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I'm fine, how are you?
I'm a little bit swamped, honestly, so I'll be honest, I did not have the most time to prepare the show, but luckily I have you here, my expert for all questions Borussia Dortmund. So I think we should just dive right in and talk about yesterday's win in the Champions League. Overall, a relatively nice victory, 20 shaky-ish minutes after that slapstick goal that Dortmund conceded. But my overriding feeling coming out of this game was that I was relatively appeased with the performance, especially considering that Niko Kovac made 5 changes to the starting lineup that started against Mainz. What were your thoughts and takeaways from that game? And maybe we talk a little bit about the initial changes that he made to the starting 11.
Now you're putting me on the spot because I don't remember exactly who came in.
So Niklas Süle came in for Schlotterbeck.
Yeah.
Bellingham for Metscher. Girassi for Brandt, if you will. And then Chukwuemeka for Bayer. That makes sense.
Was that 5?
I don't know.
Anyway.
Adi Eliasson for Kuto, right? I think he came in too. So.
Yeah. I mean, the surprise obviously was Süle coming in for Schlotterbeck. I don't think anyone necessarily saw it coming, especially not us journalists, because they put Schlotterbeck in the pre-match press conference, which obviously doesn't have to mean anything, but usually that player is more likely to play than not, I would say. Obviously, in terms of Schlotterbeck, he came back from his injury, then played 180 minutes against Wolfsburg and Mainz when he was probably slated to play like maybe half of that. So it was obvious that he was going to get rested either against Bilbao or against Leipzig ahead of the international break. They chose the Bilbao game. Maybe they looked at Athletic as the weaker opponent attacking wise, which I think right now is probably correct, given that Nico Williams was unavailable for this match, for example. Oyhan Sunset wasn't playing either, so I think if we want to call it a gamble in terms of the lineup, it certainly came off. I think the only one who looked a bit shaky outside of Süle's, I guess, mistake, if you want to call it that, before the goal they conceded, I think that was just more of an unfortunate situation, to be honest. The player whose level dropped off a bit, I would say, was Joe Bellingham. I joked about, his parents being there and them having to show Mark Bellingham the first 26 minutes because that was the time when I until that point, counted 3 somewhat dangerous losses of possession. I mean, I think the first one came in the 2nd minute, which was like a ground pass over 10 meters that he played straight to the opponent. So to his credit, to Joe Bellingham's credit, he grew into the game in the second half much better. Also had a decent shooting opportunity where I think it was Daniel Svensson's head.
It was like 3 deflections, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it was still like, it's good to see a player who isn't really in the game take on that shot instead of looking for another solution. And ultimately, I think Bellingham is still going to be fine. It's just, he hasn't gotten the minutes, and sometimes when you're playing in central midfield, it can be difficult. I think Marcel Sabitzer talked about this after the game. to then come in and be expected to be like the conduit between defense and the attacking department. So nothing I would be, worried about too much.
Yeah, we mustn't forget he's 20 years old. It was his first Champions League appearance. Like I would be very nervous as well. So I'm giving him a lot of slack on this game for sure. Like I saw a lot of people on Twitter like making fun of him and saying, 40 million for this guy. I think Joe Bellingham has qualities that will help Dortmund in the long run, but I think we all need to exercise some patience, and I think it was perfectly fine for your first Champions League start. Yeah, obviously don't play that wayward pass right in the second minute that could have invited Athletic to a big chance, but luckily I think they just stumbled it away in the end. But yeah, like you said, he improved in the second half. Was it a super inspiring performance by him? I wouldn't say that, but you definitely see a few glimpses of what Joe Bellingham can turn into.
Yeah, and I think he's also not necessarily being helped by being moved around a bit, like not only between, bench and starting 11, but also, at the Club World Cup, we were talking about him basically linking up with Serhou Guirassy up front, being like a target number 10, if that exists in modern football, I don't know. And now Niko Kovac has actually come out, I think, the previous week and said that he views Bellingham certainly long-term as a number 6, so a holding midfielder, which I guess I have to give you credit on, Stefan, because if listeners recall, when we discussed this, I was more of the opinion that Bellingham is a bit more of an attacking player, whereas you called him a defensive midfielder. I'm not sure I see him there still, even after hearing Niko Kovac say it, but, maybe it's also just down to his need to get settled, get the minutes in. In a way, he's kind of a victim of the lack of injuries and problems in Dortmund's team. Like, I don't know how many times over the last few years we've been able to say, after a big Champions League game that nobody picked up any kind of knock or whatever. So the entire squad, with the exception of Aaron Anselmino, Emre Can, and Julien Duranville, is available for selection. This sort of thing doesn't usually happen at Dortmund. Obviously, your fall theory, Stefan, is in danger of falling apart, at least in terms of an injury crisis, because it's now officially autumn in Germany. It was damn cold in the stadium against Athletic, and I mean, even if they pick up like 2 or 3 injuries over the international break or whatever, it's certainly a far cry from where they were last year in October, November, when basically the same 11 players had to play every game, and oftentimes Daniel Mahlen was the only like full professional on the bench. Like it's been night and day, and obviously I think a lot of credit needs to go to Niko Kovac and his coaching staff, because for whatever else you were able to say about his playing style, whatever, at every club he's been, the players have been fit and haven't really had to deal with too many injuries, and whatever it is they are doing, it seems to be working its magic also in Dortmund.
Well, as for this lineup, I was really happy to see this much rotation, honestly. Obviously, Daniel Svensson is the only guy who, I don't know, has he played literally every minute so far? But he is tasked with pretty much starting every game, because there's no cover really for him. I mean, you can move Bensebaini up for him if Schlotterbeck also starts. I think that's maybe something we'll see in the not too distant future, but maybe also not in the next 2 games, because they're relatively crucial. But I mean, we have the international break coming up. I'm really hoping that fall apart fall will not happen, but like you said, it's only the beginning of fall. Let's see how things look, at the end of November and beginning of December, because it's going to get dicey one way or another. even if Dortmund have a healthy squad. But let's just talk a little bit more about this game, because what I really liked is the way that Dortmund created their goals. I mean, the first goal was very similar to how Svensson scored in Mainz. Another nice pass from Riasson this time to feed Adeyemi, and Adeyemi is just so quick right now that him breaking through is against another defender. People say we don't have any 1v1 players, but Adeyemi's pace often actually makes him a really good 1v1 player, because he can just run past his opponents by the sheer amount of speed. And it is really nice to see Daniel Svensson be there where he needed to be. I was hoping for him to hit the ball a little bit harder, so that the goalkeeper wouldn't even have the chance to save it, even though Unai Simon did not manage to keep it out. But I thought that Svensson gave him almost too much of a chance to save that one. But either way, a really nice goal, and especially in the first half, I did not feel like Athletic had much to respond, honestly. I want to shout out Marcel Sabitzer, who did win the man of the match officially in the end, even though I disagree. I think Daniel Svensson could have had it as well, but Sabitzer, just that the way he presses and how he dictates the intensity level of Borussia Dortmund right now is really impressive to me. I mean, you see him run at opponents from his midfield position at full speed almost, and really puts a lot of pressure on the ball carriers, and really forces quick and often false decision by the opponents, and creates turnovers, creates a lack of control. Athletic had, if I want to give them praise for one thing, I thought that they had a really good system to themselves control the game here and there a little bit, but they were not allowed to control the game insofar that they really created a lot of big opportunities out of their own possession. So I think that's also down credit to Sabitzer. And the second goal, similarly, really nice, flowing play between several players, and Chukwuemeka obviously in the end slotting it home after Girassi. I think he was hoping for the 1-2 pass, but the ball just never found him again. Instead, it found the bottom corner. Maybe a quick question for you, Lars. Overall, how did you see Chukwuemeka's performance? I was on the phone with a friend. We were watching the game together almost, and he was not too happy with Chukwuemeka, especially in the first half. But I was, insisting that he was playing well, and that you see like good glimpses, but maybe he's always this one little step or one little thing away from making a really good play. But I was content with the first 45 minutes, and then obviously the second half until he got subbed off. I was also okay, also considering that he had a couple of nice wins of possession.
Well, during the games, I have to do like a report card, I guess, for all the players, and I usually start at halftime, basically write in everything they've done in the first half. And for Chukwuemeka, I think I said something to the extent of he tried a lot, but the end product wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically the first thing and he did in the second half was score. So obviously I had to switch out that latter part. I actually think he made the wrong decision for his goal, because Daniel Svensson tried to pull the defender away with him to give Chukwuemeka like an open shooting lane for his stronger right foot, but he went on his left and then got lucky because the shot was deflected ever so slightly, but obviously fortune favors the bold, or however the saying goes. So I think if there's one thing we can say about Kane Chukwuemeka is that he doesn't lack for confidence on the ball. He's often trying to, perform a bit of magic on the ball, give the team a spark in that way. So I think with him, you kind of have to live with, those spells of the game where one trick doesn't come off and maybe he still tries to dribble again when, the easy pass might have been on. In that way, maybe he's the spiritual successor of Jamie Gittens, obviously a good friend of his who I guess also sometimes made people a bit, mad with his decision making, but the end product was there often enough for his style to kind of pay off for Dortmund. And I think at the end of the day, that might be the same sort of thing with Chukwuemeka. I think when they signed him back from Chelsea, we talked about him being probably the long-term number 10 for Dortmund. And I to this point, I haven't seen anything that would suggest otherwise, because while from a pure player profile, because of his size and whatever, you probably think of him more as a central midfielder than a pure number 10. But I think just his technical ability on the ball makes him a perfect fit, in an even more advanced role. And to be honest, I think you could easily convince me that he's among the, 10, 15 most gifted in terms of ball handling players in the Bundesliga. And obviously the number shrinks quite considerably when we only talk about Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, I mean, his dribbling skill is really good, and I want him to take on players. I think if he has more match rhythm, I think we'll see that even in a better way. But I think he definitely has the skill set to just sort of walk through defenses and really put a lot of pressure on opponents. Obviously, what he then needs to learn is, when he draws so many opponents onto him, how to utilize that space and maybe then pass out of it at the right moment, and where to put the ball, whether it's more in front of his teammate or where the teammate is, or behind the teammate, depending on what the situation calls for. I think these little adjustments he still needs to learn a little bit, but overall I think it's good to see him start and play for what I think it was like 70 minutes, right? Just to and obviously score the goal, I think gives him also a nice amount of confidence. So it's nice to see that opportunities, I guess, were taken. Even Joe Bellingham after the game, or rather Niko Kovac after the game, said that he wouldn't be too critical of that performance either, because I think one guy from Ruhr-Nachrichten asked about his performance and said it wasn't all that great. Bit rude, but whatever. I'm very content, and also it's good to see that we had a lot of quality to come off the bench. I mean, brought on Julian Brandt it was 63 minutes that Chukwuemeka played. That's also the same time that Maxi Bayer came on for Adeyemi, who once again had, in my book, a really good game. I also like all the fire that Adeyemi brought to this game. He was chatting a bit to teammates and was also not very happy with the refereeing, but I personally see it as a positive. I'd rather he care, and maybe it's a little bit over here and there, but I still prefer that over someone who's just lifeless and boring. So I'm all for a little bit of fuego on the field from Karim Adeyemi, and brought on Mecha, brought on Schlotterbeck, brought on Fabio Silva for like the 5 minutes of garbage time, if you will. But Lars, what do you make of Borussia Dortmund's let's say shaky bit after they conceded in the 61st minute, and then all of a sudden Athletic really turned the screw? Because I'll be honest, in the first hour of the game it did not feel like this game was ever really in question, because Dortmund had things under control pretty well until then.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that analysis, and I was actually quite disappointed with the away performance. Not that I watch Athletic too often, but whenever I catch them on TV, you kind of, I don't want to necessarily say marvel at the technical level or whatever, but you still, it's a it's a team that plays decent football usually, and they seemed downright disinterested in having the ball in the first half. I mean, whenever I looked up at the Jumbotron in the Champions League, they rotate stats, and one of them is like completed passes, and Dortmund were doubling up on Bilbao for basically the first 55 or so minutes. Which obviously when you play against a team from La Liga, you don't necessarily expect, because the individual quality in terms of passing, ball handling and all that is quite high. And then obviously they scored the lucky goal. I mean, there was nothing in it. I think at that point, Gregor Kobel had made one sort of stop where he pushed the ball, a bit too far in front of him for my liking, but obviously he wasn't really in the game so far, so it's not like anything wild came off it. And then I guess that's the period after the goal kind of shows you that in the Champions League, like, nothing's ever completely easy. I mean, outside of maybe playing against Paphos on Cyprus, I don't know how many like games where over 90 minutes nothing happens against a team from a top 5 league in Europe. Like, it's the Champions League. All the teams are there for a reason, even Pathos. And sometimes you kind of have to suffer a little bit, and it wasn't outrageous. It wasn't like Athletic had, chance after chance. I think the most dicey moment came when Daniel Svensson saved the ball before one of their attacking players might have just put it in from like a yard away. Obviously, that was a crucial moment in the game, because a few minutes later they scored their lucky third goal, and then that was basically that. But I think even Ernesto Valverde, the head coach of Bilbao, said after the game that they wouldn't really have deserved to get anything out of this performance, because they were quite poor and Dortmund were in control for so much of the game, and so I guess easily in control for so much of the game, that it would have been very much, smash and grab if Bilbao had scored the equalizer. But I will say when they scored the offside goal, because of the way we are angled in the press box, I could definitely not make out whether that was offside, whether it was close. So that was the one moment where I guess I had to think back at the Juventus game and wondered, have they managed to squander another 2-goal lead here? But I mean, everyone would have seen either on TV or in replay that the offside position was quite clear, and basically that was that then, because they only had the Svensson moment after that, I think.
I would name one more chance for when Navarro beat Schlotterbeck on the side and sort of tried to curl it into the top corner. I thought that was a pretty good chance too. I mean, the expected goal number is 0.12, so maybe it wasn't that good of a chance, but certainly in the Champions League and from that position, I've seen players score, especially once they've beaten a defender and basically can pick the corner. But that being said, I mean, Julian Brandt himself also had another really good opportunity that was saved by Unai Simon. So if we really look at the chances, I think Dortmund obviously had more than enough to win the game. But there was certainly a minute where Bilbao had a chance to really turn this game on its head. But that being said, I think it is good to see that Dortmund carried themselves out of it. And yeah, I think we need to reiterate it that it is impressive that Dortmund can control a game like this for such a long period. And yeah, obviously, like you said, you have to suffer, and ideally you don't see a game like this completely controlled for 90 minutes. But in the Champions League, and you've seen in glimpses and sparks or whatever you want to call it, you really did see Bilbao's quality, also the individual quality. They certainly on a better day could have given Dortmund much more trouble than they did at the end. So I'm really happy with how Dortmund responded in the end. And yeah, nice goal from Sabitzer/Girassi in the end of a set piece, and then the second moment or second phase of that set piece to capitalize. That did Dortmund have a lot of luck there? Yeah, for sure. But certainly still just kept the foot on the gas and looked for another goal and responded to Athletic's stint of pressure. So to me, that was good. And obviously, Julian Brandt with a dagger later on was also really good situation of counter pressing and winning the ball. I think Metscher just passed it to Bayer at this moment with his first touch, and Bayer with another really nice setup for Julian Brandt. So I thought it was another nicely taken goal. My mother-in-law asked me at this moment whether Unai Simon should have saved that ball, and I was like, if they're hit that hard and flat, it's not that easy oftentimes. I think Dortmund can be really happy with the result. They're now in 7th. I mean, it's only 2 match days played, but being among the top 8, I think that's a very good foundation for the rest of the Champions League campaign and the league phase. So we'll see what's going to happen away to Copenhagen in 2 or 3 weeks. But until then, I'm happy to put this game to rest. Once again, shout out to Svensson for scoring and that goal line save. And let's put our focus a little bit on that Mainz game because it was a relatively dominant 2-0 win that was not too fancy, classic Arbeitssieg, if you will, but I think Dortmund did more or less just exactly what you would expect from Dortmund on the road, and something they've often enough not managed to show. I don't think there's too much to highlight in between those two really nice counter-attacking goals that Dortmund scored. Of course, the story goes that Mainz just hit the post a minute or so before Dortmund scored the opening goal via Daniel Svensson. I personally am very in awe how good our counter-attacking has become, because under Nuri Sahin, honestly, that was a bit of a problem that we had so many opportunities to score in a transition, but for one reason or another, never managed to, finish off these counterattacks. And now I feel like we're consistently doing that. Even the second one where Julian Brandt bungled the pass back to Adeyemi a little bit, still, or rather the other way, where Adeyemi's initial pass to Julian Brandt was a little bit off. I'm very content with a performance like this. How did you see that game in Mainz, and are there any other big takeaways other than that Gregor Kobel finally did something good with a long pass to Adeyemi?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the game was basically in the books when they scored the second goal, because Mainz didn't do enough to really mount a comeback charge. So, the sending off for Zentner after that nice long ball from Kobel basically only was the icing on the cake, or however you want to say it. I
should probably mention the whole Julian Brandt slotting in for Guirassy thing. Sorry, I should have mentioned that initially.
Yeah, I mean, they were talking both in the pre-match press conference and then even in the pre-match interview before warm-up started that, Guirassy, no problem. He picked up a knock on his thigh muscle, but he can basically run it off. And I mean, oftentimes players can do that because it's about, getting that the blood circulating better and the blockage being drained, as it were. But this time he couldn't. And then obviously Fabio Silva isn't ready to play a significant amount of minutes yet. So the logical conclusion was bringing on Brandt and moving Bayer into central forward position, which I think Bayer really suffered from because they kind of played like Guirassy was there. So there were a lot of long balls that Maxi Bayer had to, play with his back to the goal, which just isn't his strength. He needs the balls in behind his runs and all that. But obviously Brandt with his 2 assists made up for whatever they missed without Guirassy. It's definitely a nice feeling for them. I'm sure that even on short notice, they're arguably most important player because he's the best goal scorer. So that's usually how that goes. But even if he's missing on short notice, they can still put in what I would say is just a very professional performance, like the kind of thing that we oftentimes, especially during the first half of the season, were kind of clamoring for and criticizing them for not really having. I mean, I think it's often down to like self-confidence and just being on a good run of form, because let's say last year, definitely the Mainz shot on the post doesn't hit the post but goes in, and then they are a goal down away from home, and it's all tough going and all that. And as it was, he hit the post and Dortmund basically score, on the other end of the pitch. I don't know how many seconds later. And I think they are in this kind of run where scoring the first goal gives them so much security in themselves that I don't know how much they are, fretting winning those games now. Obviously, you might point at the St. Pauli and the Juventus games as, I guess, counter arguments to that. But to me, it seems like whenever they are in front these days, they have a level of confidence that they are going to, finish the job, as it were. And obviously, the interesting thing about Daniel Svensson scoring two 1-0 goals in 1 week, basically, is that before the game against Mainz, there was a lot of chatter about him looking a bit too tired because he has played every minute of every game, and he's obviously also now a full-time starter for Sweden, and his playing style is very demanding because he basically doesn't stop running. Niko Kovac gave him in a press conference the nickname Daniel Düsentrieb, which I think in English is gyro gear loose, which doesn't have the same kind of ring to it as Daniel Düsentrieb has for Germany is. He's a Disney character from the Donald Duck universe, basically, if people don't know him.
Gyro gear loose is his...
I looked it up a couple of days ago because we might have talked to him about it in the mix zone, but after the game yesterday, the mix zone was so crowded that I didn't get a question in. But ever since he got that nickname, and Niko Kovac also compared him to Joshua Kimmich, which in terms of football is one of the highest compliments that can be paid to a player in Germany. And especially coming from Kovac, because famously the stat goes that Kimmich played 64 of Niko Kovac's 65 games in charge of FC Bayern, and the one he missed, he was suspended for in the Champions League, and they immediately went out against Liverpool in, I think, the run of 16. So ever since that, high praise in both the new nickname, I guess, and the Kimmich comparison, Daniel Svensson has scored the first goal in both games, and I would argue, as you have, that he might have been the more deserving winner of the Man of the Match award against Athletic. He was definitely among the highest graded players by myself for both the Mainz and the Athletic game. So sometimes these players who look, tired and overworked, or however you want to put it, can get themselves out of that sort of rut. Maybe just scoring once, and getting a bit of a mood on.
Well, I mean, if you just take it as a metaphor, but in terms of distances between, his goal line clearance and the position from where he scored the first goal against Bilbao, it just really shows what a big distance he basically covers, because it's as end to end as you can almost get, right? So I'm extremely happy with Svensson, and also for that with Riasson, how they both played actually in the Champions League. I thought that both had some really good moments, especially I think the linesman took one moment away from Riasson very early in the game where he raised the flag prematurely, and the replay showed that it probably wasn't even offside, so Riasson might have even done a little bit more than just get that one pre-assist. But yeah, either way, I thought both are in a really good patch of form. And yeah, like you just said, I mean, Dortmund have taken the lead in every game this season, which is huge. Coaches where their teams don't have a run, they often say, well, once we take the lead, things would look a little different. And right now, Dortmund are doing that. They have now 4 consecutive clean sheets, and they are 13 consecutive league games unbeaten. So these are all very positive stats that are you can sneeze at. Even, yes, you can look at the table and say, yeah, Dortmund's opponents so far, none of them were in the top 8, because I think the highest right now ranking after 4 or 5 match days is Mainz. Is St. Pauli in 9th, but these are exactly the kind of opponents that Dortmund too often stumbled over last season. And obviously, it is still very important to gather these points. I mean, Dortmund so far have only literally dropped 2 points, right? So that is really good. Unfortunately, now they will play 2 very tough games against Leipzig, and then after the international break against Bayern. And yeah, I'm really intrigued to see how Dortmund will respond after a Champions League night. I think one thing I still wanted to praise about say about the Mainz game, but also the last games in general. I think we can count the Wolfsburg game in there. At least to me, it looks like they are very efficient with their energy spending right now, if that makes sense to you. I don't think they are always all blazing. They're definitely stepping on the ball here and there. They're certainly milking the clock and all these things to just have more breaks on the field. I think maybe I'm just interpreting things, and maybe it's not actually correct, but to me at least it appears as though that Dortmund deliberately are trying to conserve energy wherever they can. So if they're doing this, I think that's a very pragmatic approach, and deserve to be praised, considering the many games they have, and how you have to approach a long season like this. So at least from my standpoint, it is working out right now. But of course, Leipzig right now, after losing the opening game of the Bundesliga against Bayern 6-0, they have beaten Heidenheim. They've also beaten Mainz 1-0, 3-1 win against Cologne. And then recently they've also beaten Wolfsburg 1-0. So 4 wins in a row also for Leipzig. They are in 3rd place, just 1 point off Dortmund, who of course have 13 points. What is obviously interesting is that Leipzig, with that 1-0 against Wolfsburg, only broke even their goal difference, because it was still negative from the thrashing on match day 1. But yeah, team that does not play midweek games, as they are not in the Champions League or Europa League or Conference League, because they played such shitty football, and so they get to rest while Dortmund don't. And I still maintain the position that this is a very big advantage for Leipzig. Lars, what can we expect now on Saturday? Dortmund, think in the last home game did beat Leipzig. However, it's never an easy match for them. So yeah, do you expect more rotation? I think Niko Kovac has spoken quite clearly about that this is something that's going to happen more and more as the season progresses. And what do you make of Leipzig under Ole Werner right now?
I mean, the only extended look I've gotten at Leipzig was against Bayern in the season opener, and to be honest, like the result is obviously quite damning, but I think Leipzig kind of conceded, if memory serves, the 3rd goal, or maybe it was the 4th, at the worst possible time, because they really got into the game in the second half when they brought on Antonio Nusa. I think he scored a world-class goal that was then chalked off for offside, if, again, memory serves. And then, I mean, we all know the story as it goes away to Bayern when they are on form, and these things can happen and don't necessarily have much to say about your level of performance. Obviously, you already mentioned, Leipzig's results since then, and it's very similar to what Dortmund have done, like beat the opposition that, you are supposed to beat. Obviously, you also can only beat who's put in front of you. So I always think it's a bit disingenuous to say, well, they haven't been tested in terms of, Dortmund or Leipzig. Like, you don't make the schedule yourselves. If your start is easy in terms of, the position, then that's how it goes. Like, I always find it interesting when people are saying that we shouldn't, crown Dortmund too early or whatever, when they've lost exactly 0 games against teams other than FC Barcelona and Real Madrid since last meeting Leipzig in the middle of March, which is a long time ago. And in the same time frame, Bayern have also only lost 3 games against Inter, Benfica, and PSG. So to me, they are, until otherwise, maybe the proof will come in Munich, or maybe even against Leipzig. But until proven otherwise, I am of the opinion that Bayern and Dortmund are cut above the rest of the league, including Leipzig. So in terms of, my expectations, it's a home game for Dortmund. They are in an incredible run of form. So I want to see at least a confident performance, obviously, against a team of, the individual quality that Leipzig bring. Anything can basically happen. And, I'm not going to sit here and say, the season is ruined if they, by some happenstance, lose 2-1 against Leipzig on Saturday. That is definitely within the realms of possibility, as it were. But you also mentioned, Kovac talking about rotation. He basically said there's going to be another round of that in terms of the game on Saturday, because they wanted to keep the legs fresh this week. Also having, the trips to the national teams in mind for a lot of the players. 5 of them alone in terms of the German national team. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be another, let's say, 3 to 5 substitutions. Schlotterbeck coming back in the team for Süle. I'm assuming Mecha is going to start over Bellingham. I wouldn't be shocked if Pascal Groß started over Sabitzer, just because Groß hasn't really played much, and since he hasn't been called up for Germany, he might be able to give you 90 minutes, whereas with Sabitzer at the end of an Englische Woche, you might be tempted to maybe rest him a little bit. Maybe that means, subbing him off after 60 minutes, or maybe it's bringing him on for the final 30. And then I think basically every time when I have to predict a lineup, I have no idea whether to put Brandt or Bayer next to Adeyemi and Guirassy. But would it be all that surprising if this time Adeyemi got a break? Because if memory serves, Bayer had a great game against Leipzig last season at home. And obviously Adeyemi needs a break at some point. Maybe he gets it at the national team because he's not a guaranteed starter under Julian Nagelsmann, but I don't know if Niko Kovac wants to, put his fortune with another coach. And obviously a lot has been made about the great run of form Karim Adeyemi has been in. But if we want to look back at last season, he also had a very convincing start to the campaign. He scored the hat-trick against Celtic, and then in the same game, he picked up a muscle injury that took him out for, I want to say, 6 to 8 weeks. Maybe it was even longer. And, that would be the, I guess, devastating sort of thing that a head coach tries to avoid by rotating players. And sometimes that even means, letting your in-form attacking player come off the bench, which is never a bad idea against tiring defensive legs.
Yeah, that is for sure. I'm sure Adeyemi would also be a big impact off the bench. He has proven that time and again. Obviously, considering that he only played in quotation marks 63 minutes against Bilbao, maybe he'll still start. Maybe Kovac will say that the half of hour of less play will suffice for him to start again on Saturday. I think that was certainly probably why he was hooked this early. But honestly, I am where you are in really struggling with who is going to play because of the available squad depth. It's a very new feeling for the Yellow One, honestly. So I think we can be certain that Schlotterbeck will start, and I'm pretty sure that Zule will start from the bench this time again. Also, I am wondering how the setup is, whether the lineup will be once again similar to how it was against Mainz, because I personally, I don't know about you, but considering the question you asked Kovac before the Champions League game, I assume you have a similar opinion. I struggle to take out Bensebaini out of the lineup as left center half right now. So I would probably have Schlotterbeck in the center of the defense right now, and then Anton on the right until further notice. That would be my setup. I would be going with from here on out. What are your thoughts?
I think it's quite interesting that we can even have that sort of discussion, because obviously when Bensebaini covered for Schlotterbeck, it was always under the assumption that, he's a left back who's deputizing and obviously knows it from the Algerian national team and at times also at Gladbach. But he's always been a left back for Dortmund. But then two things happened. They signed Daniel Svensson, who can, what was his name? Gyro Gearloose, doesn't need a rest or whatever, or has great ideas, I suppose. And Bensebaini obviously did very, very well when replacing Nico Schlotterbeck. And as you said, I asked Schlotterbeck himself, and he was full of praise for Bensebaini. And I think we talked about on this show before that he's surprisingly considered to be among the best players in terms of technical ability in the entire team by, the players themselves. Much like Rafael Guerrero used to be the king in that, vote, or however you want to put it. So I'm actually right there with you in terms of Bensebaini, Schlotterbeck in the center, and Anton on the right. I think that's basically unquestioned, unless he has to play in the middle. I think that's gives you the best of all worlds, because both Bensebaini and Schlotterbeck are very comfortable playing long balls from good passing angles with their left feet. Anton, again, I don't think there's any question that he's like a regular starter, regardless of who else is available in central defense. And then the interesting question comes in once Niklas Süle is fully fit. Maybe Emre Can features at some point during the season. I don't think anybody really has an understanding of when he'll be back. And then obviously they also have Anselmin, who had this great debut against Union Berlin, but hasn't been seen since. So it has turned relatively quickly from the position with the most question marks into a real strength of the team. And I suppose that's kind of, a metaphor for the entire team, that a lot of questions that we might have asked even like at the start of this campaign, so 6 weeks or so ago, have kind of been answered convincingly so far. Obviously, they haven't necessarily been tested too much, but again, you can only play who's put in front of you.
I mean, I feel like I need to eat some humble pie already this season, because certainly my perception was that Julian Brandt was definitely not up to snuff whatsoever. Sabitzer was also not anyone I would have had on my lineup sheet, and here we are. Obviously, Julian Brandt right now is not an automatic starter. I'm not saying that, but at least when he's playing, he is contributing pretty much every game. And Sabitzer right now is playing also really well. I'm not saying that he is also a bang-on starter. I think there's going to be a lot of rotation overall, but for Niko Kovac to bring out good form in so many players at the same time, and really have the ability to move players around and rotate, and there's not an obvious drop off in form, is a very good sign. And really goes to show how important coaching is, and if you do it right, that you get a lot of quality out of these players. Always laugh a little bit when Sebastian Kehl says that we trust the quality that we have in the team, but right now I think we're actually seeing that quality, and we all have reasons to be very content with how things are developing. I think for the first time in a long time, I'm relatively at ease. I'm not saying that Dortmund will challenge for a title or be certainly a Bundesliga frontrunner instantly, but at least in terms of medium and short-term development, I'm relatively happy. Of course, there's still a lot of question marks. We talked about, where is Joe Bellingham going to go? Is Kani Chukwuemeka, is he going to be a real impact player with his health concerns? What happens if there are injuries on key positions, like say Svensson, for example, that might not be that easy to replace. And of course, how will Fabio Silva develop? I mean, his first 5-6 minutes against Mainz looked very promising, but again, 5 minutes against tired legs against a beaten opposition is certainly also not something to really go off of. So we'll just have to wait and see, but I think there are a lot of positive storylines and players finding form, and for Sabitzer, he really looked like down in the dumps for a long time last season, and so for him to sort of come back to life and really play well is certainly credit to him, but also credit to Kovac, and shuts me up a little bit, and goes to show that in this sport and in this game, a lot of things can shift quickly and narratives can change quickly, and we of course need to be aware of it. But if you talk about something daily, then you can also only go off of the observations you have at hand at that moment. But for the back of the mind, we should always remember things can always change for the better also very quickly. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Lars, are there any other things we should mention ahead of the Leipzig game? Obviously, we already talked a little bit about Leipzig having the advantage of having fresher legs. But above that, Leipzig obviously also a team that went through a lot of changes. Any players we should highlight from them that are in danger of hurting us?
I guess Bakayoko, who was strongly rumored or linked with Dortmund, even though I'm still not sure where he would be playing, because he's like an out-and-out winger, and those don't really exist. Like, he would probably play in Adeyemi's position, and the way Adeyemi is played, I don't think you will convince me that signing someone for I don't know how much money from Eindhoven would have been a better choice. But Bakayoko seems to have come on recently. He scored 2, from what I've seen, almost identical goals, where he dribbled a little bit and then had a ground shot towards the right post, as it were. But honestly, I think the story for Leipzig season so far has kind of been the resurgence of Christoph Baumgartner, who's not obviously one of the most exciting players, considering how much money Leipzig always spend on 18-year-olds people have never heard of, and who then go on to have really solid careers. They've also spent quite a bit of money on a real bully of a striker in Romulo from, I think it was Göztepe in Turkey. Not necessarily a hunting ground for top European sides, but he seems to be a pretty good player. So it being Leipzig, there are at least 5 or 6 players in that team that I can guarantee you will at one point of their careers play in the Premier League and probably bring them 40 plus million euros or however much in transfer fees. So it is a very good test, if we want to call it that, for Dortmund, because in terms of just the individual quality on the pitch, I think this one, then the game against Bayern, and whenever they are facing Leverkusen and maybe Frankfurt, that's basically it in the Bundesliga. So for all the people who are kind of wondering, have Dortmund been tested well enough? Do we trust their ascendancy, as it were, already? I think Leipzig is step 1, and then Bayern away is step 2, and we should have a much clearer picture of where this season might be headed after those 2 games.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if they win both these games, I think we can with confidence say that Dortmund are truly, really back. Right now, I think the episode title might be just "Are we back?" ? And then I guess we'll get the answer in a few weeks' time. But yeah, thank you again for coming on this week. Next week, I don't think we'll have a podcast because I'm simply too busy to record, but we'll be back for sure with a preview for the Bayern game, and then discuss the Leipzig game. And I don't know if there will be any announcements in terms of contract extensions of Nico Schlotterbeck or so, if that's something to discuss. Certainly been a hot topic around Dortmund in the last few days, but yeah, I'm fairly confident that we'll get some positive news eventually. But I also understand if Nico Schlotterbeck just is going to, take it a little slow, and himself wants to see these questions answered that we just asked. So until then, as always, thank you for listening. Have a great weekend and goodbye.